We will get started momentarily. And actually, Joyce, I will hand things over to you to kick us off.
Sounds good. So since it's 5 past, I'm imagining that people will probably be coming in. So I think we have a very full panel, so I think we should get started right now. Um, so I wanted to welcome everyone and welcome our wonderful panelists today. As most of you know, AMA has been very involved right in the grassroots in organizing with advocates to comply with the MBTA Communities Law. And it has been an honor and a privilege to partner with Milton, first through Affordable Inclusive Milton, AIM, and then this past winter for 2 very intensive months through the Yes for Milton campaign. So I think Milton, we were talking about this the last 5 or 10 minutes. Milton is on everyone's mind. In fact, we went to Yimby Town. This was in Austin, Texas, and people all over the country were, "What's about Milton? What's about Milton?" So it's not just in Massachusetts, if you can believe it. Um, and I think people are, you could say, well, the referendum was lost, but if you've read the piece that I wrote about the good news about Milton, there are 3 great reasons why this campaign was a win. First of all, Milton voted in compliance at town meeting. And if you had asked me in July, I never would have thought that would have happened. But I'm very excited to hear what Carolyn and Ada are talking about of that campaign before the referendum. That's the first reason. And the second reason, so excited to hear to have the panel talk about the most robust organizing campaign that I have ever seen. Within 2 months, it was a 2.5 month, less than that campaign. This team had weekly strategy meetings. They raised over $30,000, had 3 text banks, an enormous canvassing operation you're going to hear about. It was an incredible operation, and that made this campaign a winner. And the third reason, and that I want to say, is that over this time, this group of advocates formed a community. And what I'd like to say is we may come into our activism because of our belief in a cause, but we stay for the community. And I saw people who were strangers who became real friends. It was just incredible. And I felt those bonds with people too. So I want to say to all the panelists, I'm looking at your wonderful faces. It has been just an amazing journey with you. And you know what? All of you know, I have an advocate I'm looking at now on the screen, my friend from Gloucester. This work is hard. My friend from Newton, this work is really hard. So we have to support each other. This is not just the panel telling what they have done, but also our being a network and supporting each other in this very hard work. It's been 50 plus years, more than that, of exclusionary zoning. It's not going to turn around overnight. So with that introduction, I want to say that each panelist will have about 4 minutes to present their part of the topic. And then we're going to go through each topic, and I will introduce each panelist. So I first want to start with Carolyn Cahill and Ada Rosemarin, and they could just wave. They're going to be talking about, what are they talking about? They're talking about the campaign up to the town meeting. So how they even got through town meeting, which was a big process in itself. So I welcome Carolyn and Ada to present now.
Thank you, Joyce. I'll kick it off on my end. Hi, everyone. My name is Carolyn Cahill. I'm a town meeting member here in Milton and a member of AIM, which is Affordable Inclusive Milton. And AIM's mission is to increase the amount of affordable housing in town and promote a racially and economically diverse population throughout the geography of the town. So AIM is doing a lot of great work here in Milton. When MBTA communities came about, AIM got very involved, and in fact held the very first informational session about MBTA communities for the community. And that was probably about a year before we went to a town meeting vote. During that time, that like we'll say 1 year, AIM made a point to follow when planning board meetings would be happening, when select board meetings would be happening, and we organized having speakers from the community go and attend those meetings in support of MBTA zoning. You know, our planning board was not as proactive as I think many of us wanted them to be. And so it was important for us to put a lot of pressure on them to you know, come up with a compliant plan. And throughout that process, Joyce here played an instrumental role in helping us organize and helping us spread the message of AIM. We did a couple of mailers. We got kind of word out to residents about MBTA zoning. And then as town meeting approached, we started to identify town meeting members that we knew would be in support of MBTA zoning, so that we knew we would have the votes on the floor of town meeting, which we successfully did. So with that, I'll hand it off to Ada, who can talk a little bit more from there.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ada Rosemarin, and I'm a former school committee member, and some of my friends were involved in this effort, and I was watching as the year went by with the efforts of our planning board and the progress or lack thereof with MBTA zoning. And as this was approaching town meeting, I joined a small group that organized to plan our town meeting strategy. And we have a representative town meeting in Milton as opposed to an open town meeting. And those types of town meetings would use very different strategies. The open town meeting is much more about getting out the vote, whereas representative town meeting, we know who we're dealing with. They're elected representatives, and as Carolyn said, we went through the whole town meeting member list and identified where people stood on the issue. So we knew that going in. We had 2 full nights of town meeting debate. The first night, December 4th, was dealing with a warrant committee that advises town meeting members about articles. They had a recommendation to refer the article back for further study, and we were opposing that. We were urging people to vote no, that we thought that it was ready to go. And we took the whole night on that, and that won by 64%, that it was approved to move forward. So we went to night 2, which was a week later, where we actually got to debate the actual article. And what we did in our group was we created a program of speakers to address the points that we felt needed to be made, to try to present a well-rounded picture of what the issues were. We had waves of speakers who went down to the microphones. We had our openers, we had our closers, and speakers represented all age groups, different perspectives, different political persuasions, different parts of town, new and veteran town meeting members. We really wanted as well-rounded a group as we could. It was a long meeting, and we was only required to have a majority vote, as you all are aware in your own communities, and we won by 2/3, which we were very pleased with. We had been hearing in the meantime, while this was all going on, that our opponents were organizing for a possible referendum. And as a result, in response to that, we invoked a provision in our town charter to declare the vote an emergency measure, which would have precluded a referendum vote. unfortunately, it was ruled out of order by our moderator against our town council's advice, which was very disappointing. But then our same town charter allows for a group of residents to gather signatures of 5% of all registered voters in the town to call for a referendum vote on whatever, if they were dissatisfied with the results of town meeting. And they had 1 week. So between December 12th and December 19th, they had to gather 1,042 signatures. They got close to 3,000 signatures. And this is in the middle of December in New England, which was kind of amazing. But we can talk more about that later if you have questions. But as they collected signatures, we consulted with an election attorney who gave us a lot of advice and began to form a campaign in case we needed one. And in fact, we did need one. Our election was scheduled for February 13th. And I'm going to turn it over to Liz Dillon, who's going to tell you the next phase of our story.
Thanks. So I had not been involved with this in the town meeting portion, although I did vote, obviously, in favor of complying with the law. Tom Callahan called me like multiple times, and I said, Tom, I'm going to vote to comply with the law. But what really struck me and why I got involved is, so I'm an attorney, first of all, it's important to know, because what struck me was when there was this discussion about having it be a referendum and having it be a ballot question, I knew right then and there how much money this was going to cost the town just to then be required probably to comply. And last night at town meeting, we found out that it's going to cost, there's a flat fee for $275,000 plus like additional expenses, which is ridiculous. I mean, that's what it costs, but it's ridiculous. That's what we're spending our money on. So I just really felt compelled to get involved. And so when Tom called me again, and really Carolyn and Ada, and said, do you want to get involved in this effort? I said, yes, absolutely. I think that it's wrong what people are trying to do. I can see through some of the nice euphemisms for what they're trying to say. I think it's exclusionary zoning. It really bothers me. And so I said, yes, I definitely help. Another important thing about me is that I live in the dreaded East Milton. So I don't dread it. I like it over there. But people were very vitriolic in that particular part of town against this MBTA. And I think that the leadership of the No campaign really tried to divide the town in a way that I really wish they hadn't, and we still see lingering effects from that, by really capitalizing on this us versus them. Even it's so ridiculous to say because we live in Milton, but the rich versus the much, much richer, I guess. The sort of, oh, poor blue collar, it's not really. East Milton, wrong side of the tracks, being put upon constantly by those rich people out west. And so really just kind of trying to upset people, I think. And so anyway, we had to really strategize very quickly amongst ourselves. And I had never been involved in a campaign before, and then they kind of put me half in charge of it. And I think that it was a real fast learning curve. And I'm a town meeting member as well from Precinct 6, as I said, which is in East Milton. And so it was a real fast learning curve. I didn't know Ada or Tom or Carolyn or Matt, our other co-chair, or any of these people beforehand. And I can tell you now, like having worked on some other campaigns recently, like I like those people too, but this was the best group of people that I possibly could have asked to work with. We all got along really well. I talked to them like 500 times a day. So what we wound up doing was we had our like close, I don't know, inner circle group with the five, I don't know, I can't count, with the 5 of us. Ada, Carolyn, myself, Tom, and Matt. And then we also kind of had other groups where we had our leadership of our volunteer team, which was Nora, who's like the best. I know, because then I tried to get people to door knock for the other campaigns for the election we just recently had. And Nora's the best at getting people to come out and really volunteer, and she led that effort. And Robert, who's so good at understanding data, and led that effort. And Rob, who's not here, but he's so charismatic. He just convinces you to give him more and more money, and fundraising. And then we had Tom with messaging, Carolyn with communications. And then we also had like people that were in charge of putting all the signs. You know, we had people that were in charge of putting all the signs around. We had Chris Hart dealing with the trolls on social media. We had Kathleen leading up our group of attorneys, answering legal questions. And so I think what was really important, and Nora can talk about it from her perspective, because you did such a good job of it, was to really delegate a lot of that over to those groups. So no micromanaging, just Nora, we trust you implicitly. This is generally what we're doing. And then she was able to then have kind of sub-delegate. We had, and she could talk about it, but for the volunteer efforts, we had precinct captains. So I think I was like a co-precinct captain of precinct 6. And then allow those people to do what's best for their own precinct in their own neighborhood about how to spread the word. So I think that, you know, we really trusted people to be the experts in their field. We had a lot of meetings. Each one of these committees, subcommittees met at least once a week. We came together as a group and met once a week. The like inner circle met, I think, like literally every day. We're supposed to meet like once or twice a week, but I think we met like literally every day. And the thing for me that was really important, and this is not, you know, really that relevant, but my work was like extraordinarily supportive of all of this. And so it was really good because it takes up a huge amount of time. And I spent a lot of time just saying, I have to duck out and go be interviewed by the newspaper real quick. I'll be back in like a half an hour. And nobody thought that was weird. They all really appreciated it because I work at a university. We have a real social justice kind of mission. So I thought that was really nice. But basically, that's what I would say as far as the structure is. We very, very quickly, I think, because there are so many great people in town and just how well connected we all are on sort of the more progressive side of things, we are very quickly able to locate people who had very particular strengths. Like we have our resident graphic designer, and, you know, Rob's our resident fundraiser, and just different people who are really talented at things. And then really just trust them and put them in charge, and then let them lead their own group and then report back. And I think that that worked incredibly well. Okay, now I turn it over to somebody else. I don't know.
I'm
just gonna, sorry, jump
Yeah.
in really quick. And if speakers could just check the chat for time
Oh.
cues just periodically, that would be awesome. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Yeah.
No problem.
Thank you.
So I just want to say there are people who, you know, Milton is obviously a town meeting town, and there are people who are from cities, so it's different, you know, because they're advocating for their city councilors. So it's a different form of government, but there are some real gems here. Just because if you're a city council or city, you still could be having a referendum. Newton almost had a referendum question. So that's very relevant. And also I want to introduce our next speaker, Tom Callahan, who's going to talk about messaging, which is relevant for all of us.
Thanks, Joyce. Good evening, everybody. Just to build off on something that Liz was saying, this was incredibly, I've been involved professionally in some sort of professionally managed campaigns where you hire a consultant and you bring in sort of the paid professionals. And this was as organized and as dominated with all volunteer labor. But just to underscore, it was partly because it was a short campaign. It was ultra intense in terms of daily meetings and I'm not necessarily recommending that, but it was a very all-encompassing sort of month-long campaign, I guess, in terms of the last or 6-week long campaign. So I think it's said that if you lose by a few votes, it's a failure of your field. If you lose by 750 votes, it's a messaging failure. So I'm here to bring you the messaging failure. Here's what I would say. Yes is hard, no is simple. And that doesn't just apply to MBTA communities, that applies to every yes campaign I've ever worked on. Convincing people to vote yes, somebody steeped in politics taught me at an early age that everybody's default is no on a referendum. If they're confused, if they're unsure, anything, any doubt at all, they vote no. So we knew we had an uphill battle just to begin with because we had the yes side. Then they out-organized us in the late 2023 period where getting, as you heard, they got nearly 3,000 signatures. They had a tremendous, I mean, as you all know, can't underestimate what a head start that gave them. We didn't see that coming. We saw it coming in the last few weeks, but we didn't see that coming. Probably messaging failure number one was the town meeting portion of the campaign. We decided to just focus on town meeting members and not regular voters. We said, this is going to be won or lost in town meeting. No citizen petition in 50 years had ever gotten to that state, had ever succeeded, basically. It hadn't even been tried in 50 years. So it wasn't on anybody's radar that the referendum option would take hold. So let me get into the messaging. We had a messaging committee. It was probably too large of a committee, frankly, but we had a great committee that really worked hard on the messaging. We looked at some of the messaging in Newton and Brookline, the housing for everyone, and we rejected that. We just felt, and I think this was the right call, that Milton's typical town election turnout, which is older, whiter, and more conservative than, say, a presidential election year, would not support a housing for everyone strategy in Milton. It just wasn't, I think, going to fly. And I think that was the right call. So we had a yes message, and we decided on we thought there was a number of strengths in the yes message. They were going to be against everything. We were going to be for something. So we were for opportunity, for neighborhoods, for businesses, small businesses, for local control, for taxpayers, for state funding. Arguably, we took a too big a bite of that and had too many things on that list, but we felt like that spoke. As we talked to people, people were voting yes for different reasons, and we tried to have the messaging reflect those reasons and amplify those reasons. So we went with we are for these things. That was our public messaging. We wanted to do a messaging strategy that started positive, went negative in the middle of the campaign, and closed with a positive message. We didn't totally execute that perfectly because we had to respond to the no side, but that's essentially what we did. I think the other big thing I have to talk about that's our messaging, but we have to talk about the no messaging. They co-opted our message. We started with for opportunity, for neighborhoods, for businesses, etc. But our quiet message was on social media and others, the no side has no plan. We were planning to run with that. We never really got to run with that because they stole it. They got wind in a small town that was our plan. The no has no plan. That was going to be our whisper campaign, or maybe more than a whisper on Facebook and otherwise. When we turned negative, that's what we were going to do. they turned it on us before we had a chance to do that. And they said that the yes side had no plan, that we had no plan for the schools. The schools would be inundated with school children. We had no plan for traffic that was going to be created for, no plan for infrastructure costs, no plan to rein in greedy developers, no plan to reclassify the trolley. And they really just turned that no plan message back on us. And I personally don't know if all my colleagues agree with this, but I think that really helped seal the deal for them. That was a simple traffic, greedy developers, and our antiquated trolley became huge talking points, and traffic, particularly in East Milton, where 1,100 of the units would have been built in, or would have been zoned for in East Milton. And that's the most conservative part of town anyways, separate from these issues that really just sunk us. But there was a lot of sub messages that got through, I think. We were branded, as Liz was saying, about the working class part of town and the western part of town being more rich. There was definitely an anti-elitism part of this campaign, that we knew best for the whole town and we were dictating that to the town. Town meeting not being representative of the town, they were right on that. But so they played a lot of these things against us, and really ultimately won the day. But I'm proud of our messaging, but what they really had some savvy messages against us. So I'll end there and turn it over to Julia. I mean, no, to Joyce again.
So, yeah, I think there's so much to say with
Yes.
each subject. So one of us, Julia, I will let people know when there's 1 minute time, so to make sure that we have enough time for questions afterwards. So thank you so much, Tom. We're going to go to canvassing. Unbelievable, in 2.5 months to talk to 4,000 voters. So I want to turn it over to Nora.
Thanks, Joyce, and hi, everyone. Yeah, I get to talk about the fun part, right? I do think that canvassing is about building community, and that, as Joyce said earlier, people might come from the cause, but I think it's the relationships that really keep people going in this kind of work, and that make somebody willing to get out there in the dead of winter and knock on doors for 2 hours. I'm gonna pull up sorry, I'm so a little illiterate when it comes, I had this all lined up and now I don't, but hold tight. I just want to pull something up. And can you screen share for a moment?
I think
so that I can share my screen. Can I do that?
I think
Yes,
you can share screen.
right.
Just press the share screen button.
Okay, I see, there we go. Just okay. Sorry for no, I don't need to do that. Desktop. See, this is what happens, but we're almost there. Cancel, share.
It should be a green button.
Yeah, all right. All right, you know what? It's taking me to a settings thing. It's a new computer, so maybe that's the problem with it.
Nora, if you send it to me in the chat, this is Cassie. I can share my screen for you if you'd like.
Okay, that might be a better idea. It's really just let me see. It's really just an outline. No, Cassie, I don't want to take time doing that, but thank you. So what I was going to say, we had about 132 volunteers over the course of this campaign. And together over a 5-week period, we knocked on about 4,000 doors. So it was a big load of people. And, I think the first thing to think about is where did all these people come from? A lot of the folks were the town meeting members who voted yes, during the referendum. Ada had created a volunteer form, sign up form, So as people sort of fill that in, I was able to contact them and, you know, get to the ones who wanted to knock doors. We do have already like a standing progressive women's group in town. So with 150 names and emails, so we were able to reach out to that folks that way. And then I think just everybody's networks here, other people who have worked on campaigns, I think everybody was sort of reaching out to folks they know to see if they could help. Building community does take you need some organization. So I sort of led the door knocking effort. I had sort of a co-captain who was definitely my sounding board, even though she wasn't able to be super active in the beginning. That was Megan. I had like 2 lieutenants who worked with me. One of them is on here, Judy White Orlando. I had 2 people who could go out to any precinct. They would help train door knockers. I know they would help fill in anywhere. So Judy and Janet really kind of were also ambassadors of this whole door knocking program. And then we had the precinct teams. And I think when organizing, I find it easier to ask people if you would be a member of a precinct team, you know, or be a member of the precinct leader team rather than a precinct captain. There's something about asking one person to be a precinct captain that I think a lot of people like panic. They're like, oh, I can't do that. But you say, you know, we're going to get like 3 or 4 people from each precinct to lead the precincts. Will you do that? And generally people like that idea, because I think people who do this kind of work, you know, or volunteer work, like working together. So our precinct leaders, as Liz said earlier, really did organize their own precincts. The great thing was that we were able to give them access to the list, right? And working with AMA, we had minivan. So the benefit of having minivan is that we could very quickly get the precinct leaders, you know, the new lists they needed to go to, just disseminate the information quickly and not have to worry about data input. And I think that is probably one of the biggest things, you know, because when you have people out there knocking doors with paper lists, it's just a lot of back end work, and it's hard to keep up with. So it made it really efficient having minivan.
Sorry, Nora, could you wrap up?
Yeah. So I think that's, you know, I think the important part is really building a group of people who want to work together, and then lots of contact. We did an initial meeting. We did 3 door knocking trainings initially. I had a standing weekly precinct leader meeting. I sent out regular updates to the entire 132 door knockers so that people felt like they were in the loop and they knew that what was going on, which I think also makes people willing to sort of go out and do their thing and help. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Nora. An incredible operation in the dead of winter. So when you think people being willing to knock in the snow, it's just incredible. And I want to introduce Robert Rozovsky, who's one of the founders of Affordable Inclusive Milton, and did all the data work and data management that was involved in this huge campaign.
So good evening. I'll give an overview of pretty much the structure and process. We developed a data system for 2 major campaign activities. The first was to determine what types of voters should be targeted for any campaign activity, such as mailings, canvassing, phone calling, text banking, etc. That is, who should be our universe of voters for targeted activity. And the second major activity was to identify, therefore, individual voters and households for those target activities based on the selection of a targeted voter universe. So one might ask the question, well, why target at all? Why not go after all the voters? Well, this is really a strategic question for any campaign. And for us, and generally, the answer is twofold. We had expected resource limitations, and they just prevent you from reaching all voters, whether that's having enough money to do mailings or having enough people to do door knocking and things like that. But a second reason is that touching voters you're unsure of or are opposed to your position may boost their turnout. So targeting is really for going after the votes that you really want. So I want to talk about a couple of distinguishing aspects of these 2 goals. The first goal is based on aggregate data of voters, counts and proportions of voters meeting specific criteria. such as age, party registration, voter history. And the second goal is based on using voter level data, such as names, addresses, and contact information for outreach. So I'll talk about the methods. Looking in mid-December that it looked like there was likely going to be a successful petition referendum coming up, we obtained publicly available voter data starting in December 15th, a voter registration file, lists of voters who came out to vote in past elections. We obtained a list of school parents from the Milton Public Schools. And after the petitions were signed, we eventually manually digitized those lists so that we would know who had signed the petitions, because they were going to be constituting a universe of voters we most likely did not want to go after. All the files were merged to create a single database, and this database contained a wealth of voter level information such as names, addresses, precinct, age, party registration, and including, for those who are unenrolled voters, that is independents, selection of a Democratic or Republican ballot in selected prior primaries. We had their voting history as to whether they came out or not. We knew whether they were a school parent or not, and we also knew whether they were a petition signer or not. And we had some phone numbers for some voters. The outcomes, as discussed somewhat, we enabled analyses and we created voter lists. We did a fair amount of time during meetings in the beginning of the campaign to try to figure out what would be our best universe. This is really a crapshoot, but you want to have data that can help inform your decision. So we had generated counts of voters meeting specific criteria based on the attributes of voters in the database. And we also generated canvassing lists prior to our being able to use Minivan that were organized by precinct, street, household address. And this was facilitated by some others in the campaign who also had their own database of voters. Nora touched on Minivan. AMA was great in providing use of their Minivan and text banking systems, and data was therefore exchanged between AMA and the data system we had within the Yes for Milton campaign. This required linking of databases between the two entities. We did this by performing exchanges of data files with major success, but with some limitations. Early in the campaign, linkage between AMA data from Minivan and campaign data. I hit 4 minutes. I can stop now and deal with questions later, if that's fine.
That sounds good. It's
Okay.
an incredible, everyone could speak for a long time because there was so much, and hopefully it gives people a taste of what this campaign was like. And when you have questions, hopefully we'll have some time at the end. So I know everyone's probably looking forward to hearing from Chris Hart about how they dealt with social media, because I'm imagining that most of the communities are dealing with social media talking points that you have to address. So I'm going to hand it over to Chris for 4 minutes.
Sure. Thanks, Joyce. And good to see everybody. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk about this. So with regard to social media, I'm going to talk about how we organized, what our goals were, what we did well, and what some reflections might be from the process. So first, we formed a subcommittee. There were 9 of us who were willing to work on social media. And by social media, by the way, we also are including the website here. And from my perspective, I saw, and I think the campaign saw, this effort as one prong of a multifaceted way to get the message out. So this is really intimately tied with the overall messaging campaign. So there were 9 of us, and I was happy with that number because anything having to do with social media is sort of 24/7. And I definitely do not want to be on social media 24/7. So having 9 people was very helpful. And we put ourselves together in a text chat so that we could somebody would constantly be monitoring whatever was going on social media. And we really focused on Facebook. And the reason we focused on Facebook was because in Milton, and I assume this is true for other towns, although I don't know, that's where the public forum exists. That's where political discourse is happening regularly. And in Milton, there are more than 2 sites, but I would say there are 2 main sites that I think people focus on. And we really monitored and focused on that. And there, the membership for those sites vary somewhere between, I think, 11,000 and 13,000 or something. It's in the thousands, and about 5 figures. So we really focused on that. We also had a presence on X. We also had something going on with Threads, and we also had a very robust website, which was its own effort, and that had everything. It had alerts, it had endorsements, it had information about the campaign. Basically, it was a one-stop shop of information, and we tried to drive people there as much as we could. What we did well, I think, was to not engage in flame wars. We tried to make sure that we were getting the message out and keeping tabs on the algorithm, literally keep making sure that the algorithm was keeping our message up and keeping the no message down as much as possible. And I think we did that very well. I think that we coordinated well with the messaging folks to actually get the message out. I think, though, one of the reflections that I have from the campaign is that social media, Facebook, is a terrible place to have political discourse. And as much as I am happy with how we conducted ourselves, how we tried to keep the discourse high level, how we tried to be responsive and not be nasty, how we really tried to keep it to the message and try to be very selective about where we were going to engage and where we were not. At the same time, anything, as I discovered, anything was giving oxygen to what Tom put in the chat, what he was saying earlier, to this very simple, very fear-based no message. And it was, in other words, it's sort of this constant game of whack-a-mole in a lot of respects. You know, we're trying to get our message out and the no message down, but anything that you do just sort of gives oxygen to this very, frankly, effective and nasty way of that the other side was engaging. Not only that, but there were a couple of folks in particular on the other side who were sort of, I think, didn't sleep because they were constantly on. So that was a difficulty. But beyond that, I think we did as well as we could have.
Great. Very hard to deal with social media. Our last panelist is this campaign in less than 2 months, whatever, raised almost $30,000. Absolutely incredible. So Carolyn, if you could talk a little bit about the fundraising and what was involved with that would be helpful.
Absolutely. So the fundraising team consisted of Rob Levash, myself, and Tom Callahan. And we started by looking at what did we need our budget for the campaign to look like. And so we kind of put together our wish list of everything that we knew we were going to want, from lawn signs to palm cards to ads in the local newspaper. And that total probably came in around 25 to 30,000 right off the bat when we put everything on there. So we knew that we could always cut line items if we had to, but we really were hoping we didn't. So then we got to work. We really put Rob in charge of that piece of it. And it really started with the people we knew that supported, yes, your town meeting members, your elected officials that were all in favor of this, reaching out to them. And Rob actually made a hard ask and just said, my family has donated $250 to this campaign. Is your family willing to do the same? And so that's how the fundraising effort started. And we probably fairly quickly got to about $10,000. And Rob kind of came to Tom and I and said, I don't see how we're going to get any more money than this. I don't think it's going to happen. And we said, okay, let's build off of the people that have donated. And so from there, it became, okay, can the people that are part of the leadership team or the people who are part of the campaign committee, can you reach out to 5 people and see if we can get $50 donations from those people? And so quickly, our database kind of continued to grow. And as that database grew, Rob would then send out an email that says, we really need to do a town-wide mailer. This is what we need funds for. And that motivated people to say, okay, I almost understand where our money is going. And, Rob was able to get people to donate just about every single time he sent out an email. And probably one of the best stories from it is Liz Dillon, who co-chaired the campaign, said to, you know, her mom, you know, are you willing to donate to the campaign? Her mom kind of hemmed and hawed. Rob sent out an email on a Monday morning at 8 a.m. And next thing you know, well, Rob asked me, so I had to donate. So, you know, we did get, you know, residents, and again, it just started with a small group and then we just continued to grow. We gained, the campaign gained momentum. People wanted to get involved in something that was so positive despite how the end result ended up. I don't know if anyone else on the committee wants to share anything regarding fundraising. And Joyce, I know you want to allow time for questions. If I can just speak to the organization of the campaign briefly, because I think that is what was so important. The campaign started with our two co-chairs, which were Liz and Matt. And then we had our leadership team, which added Ada, myself, and Tom. And then we had our campaign committee. So the campaign committee was probably about 21 or so members that all included the people that you see on the screen. So the people who led the subcommittees to the campaign, and then a few other folks that were heavily involved in the campaign. And, you know, programs like Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets, you know, became a way for us all to be able to communicate. And each member of the leadership team would then sit in on the meetings of some of the subcommittees so that we could all stay informed with what was going on. So I think that's super important for the organization of everything, because communication is so important when you're leading this many people. And I think that's really where we did a tremendous job on the organizational piece of things.
I don't know about everyone else, but I'm just speechless. I'm just, this is so incredible what you were able to accomplish. So I know if people feel like they want to put some sort of emoji, I always put a heart emoji like Cassie has. Thank you to all of you. It's an inspiration. It really, really is. And it was an honor, just a pure honor to be a part of such a community. And may we never have to have another campaign like this in another community. Although you are the first, hopefully it won't follow with other campaigns. So I want to acknowledge, I did say that there are people here on this call who come from cities, so there might be a little bit of difference, but there's probably more in similarity.